business owners and executives from around the Valley. This is Business Leaders with Lance Cardoza.
Good morning, and thank you for watching Business Leaders. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Flooring Liquidators, that made this episode possible right here at KMPH Fox 26. My guest this week on Business Leaders is Miiko Anderson. She's a senior prosecutor for Fresno County, and you have a really big title because you are an expert in fields inside criminology and law.
I am a certified criminal law specialist and then a subject matter expert when it comes to human trafficking and gender-based violent crimes.
And you make that sound very short, but when you look at your bio, because you've done a lot in your short career.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And you've seen a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about your story. I like to take people that sometimes people think, well, she's tough. She's good at what she does. And she just maybe coming out of the box this way. This is how you are. But you had a rough life getting to that point of taking control of your own destiny.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate you bringing that part up because a lot of people see the end product and don't realize where the start was. And
Yeah.
for me, it was a little different because I'm from Oakland, California,
Yeah.
and I grew up an only child, but I grew up the daughter of a drug-addicted mother. And she was a teenage mother and she dropped out of high school. So I had some natural challenges that came with that.
Yeah.
And some of the difficulties as I grew up, I inadvertently repeated that cycle, not the drug addiction part, but being a single mother myself of two small children when I was in law school and working my way through law school on public assistance.
Mm-hmm.
So having those struggles that came with that and then ultimately passing the bar and moving to Fresno to become a prosecutor.
And all that in just a little bit of time. There's a lot of stuff that happened in that process that made who you are today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when I read your bio and we had a brief discussion, and I thought, oh, she's great for business leaders and to be able to bring you on the show. And a lot of people look at the trials and tribulations of life and sometimes dwell on them. Yes. And then there's people like yourself that say, no, that's not going to identify who I am. And I can help other people. And I think that's maybe why you're a great prosecutor, and you probably know why, but you can relate to people and what they're going through and their challenges.
And that's exactly it. It's because I have seen so much and experienced so much that I do have a heart for those who are victimized by crime. So that part comes easy for me in finding a way to be resourceful to get justice in that world. The other part, though, that's so exciting and new for me and is completely separate as my role as a prosecutor is my speaking and consulting now, because as a prosecutor, part of what I did on a day-to-day or do on a day-to-day is come to people when they're in trauma. So traumatic events are happening, crimes, they're assaulted, and different things are occurring. But when I speak, I get to get in front of that, so I get to deal with the preventative side of it. So that's a new lane that I'm going down. I really enjoy that part.
It sort of brought your career in full circle because you're on one side dealing with crime, and then going to the other side of the crime too, and being able to consult and be able to pull it all together, and it's sort of a holistic career that you put together.
Yeah, that's the plan.
That's
That's the
plan.
hope. That's the hope.
That's the hope.
So yeah.
What when you were going through challenges, as most youth do, and some today say, oh, it's so bad, and then there's others that always have it worse. My mom's always told me that. When you think it's bad, kid, someone always has it worse than you. So always think about that. Look at the brighter side and do what you can do to change that. What was it? What was the pivotal point for you to go after law school?
I think for me, it was the fact that I had two small children. And I knew I was in a situation where I had to provide some type of steady income for them that could not be taken away based on the economic conditions. I had to get something that couldn't be taken away. And that was probably the driving force that got me through law school and got me to Fresno. It was really trying to care for those children.
Yeah, and that was your motivator right there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you always have, as a young mind, a idea of becoming an attorney, or what was that point that said, "Hey, I might be good at this"?
Well, I did early on because I was raised mostly by my grandmother because of my mother's drug addiction. And with her, when other kids were like watching MTV, because that's the age I'm in where MTV was just coming out, and music videos, I would be watching like Perry Mason and drinking coffee because I was raised by my grandmother. So being a lawyer was kind of always in the background and what I wanted to do. But as life kind of went on, I kind of lost that once I started working and I had 2 kids and I would go to school and drop classes and come back. I kind of got disconnected from that. And it wasn't until I had an experience at work. I worked at a phone company that was heavily regulated, and I had really done a lot to get to work on time, and I still managed to be 3 minutes late. And I just could not believe that it mattered that much that I was 3 minutes late. And I had really like driven like an hour and 45 minutes and ran up the stairs and tried to hurry up and sign on, but I was still 3 minutes late. And it was at that point that I knew I had to do something different because my life wasn't supposed to be that, if that makes any sense.
No, it does, yeah.
And then from there, I started to try to go back and remember what it was that I really wanted to do before life kind of came and planted itself in my way. So that's how it all started.
It all started to go to hole, and sometimes it was a negative situation to where it was, and you didn't like the feeling.
I did not.
You didn't like the feeling. A lot of people, and sometimes people then do the same thing, expecting a different result.
Yes.
Creating the insanity in their life, and they just keep dwelling in that same spot.
Yeah.
You chose to do something different with a lot of adversity around you too, to be able to show that you can.
Yes.
And you will. What would you tell a young person that maybe is catching this, watching it Tuesday mornings at 11, Business Leaders here on KMPH Fox 26, and maybe it's a young lady, and she's sitting at home, and she's watching the show, and she sees you and says, maybe I can do that. What would you say to that young lady? And maybe somebody said that to you at some point, but what would you tell that young self?
I would say that first and foremost, you really have to be connected with what you really want, what your desire is, what your purpose is. Be connected and be clear on that, and then go after it, and don't let the conditions around you really get in the way, because as heavy as those conditions seem, they're only temporary. All of it passes in a matter of time. Kids grow up, you wind up getting a better job when you had a job that wasn't so great, and things change. And the only thing that'll really be constant if you want growth is your commitment to making your life better. So don't let it be fair weather based on the conditions. It has to be something that you have within you that's just driven.
And you become complacent and too comfortable, and then you sort of sit in that rut and never get out of it.
Absolutely. And it's easy to do because you can't always be in fight mode all the time. Yeah. But to be able to take an assessment of where you are as much as you can and as often as you can really helps with that, and keeping connected to what your ultimate goals are.
We're going to be right back, Miiko, with more Business Leaders. Don't go away. Welcome back to Business Leaders. My name is Lance Cardoza. If you'd like to catch this episode and other episodes of Business Leaders, go to businessleaders.tv and go up to the top right, click past episodes, and you'll catch the episode today of Miiko Anderson. Miiko, thank you for being on the program. You're a senior prosecutor for Fresno County, and again, you have a laundry list of things that you're really good at. And I know that you mentioned a couple of them, but you have a lot of things that you're a specialist in your career. And I want to talk to you a little about that. It's like what you do on a day in and day out basis.
There's almost 2 lanes because I do things as a prosecutor. And my assignment now is general-based crimes and violent crimes. Mm-hmm. So I handle the prosecution of those cases. And then in a second and separate lane, it's like public service and private service. It's kind of how I think of it. So in a separate lane, I do empowerment speaking, keynote speaking, and that type of thing separately.
I'm thinking, do you love speaking?
I do. I do.
Yeah. And is it that you do encourage people that maybe have that where you were and maybe to turn their life around? Is that some of the speaking you do, or is it pure speaking?
It's for that. It's for to help somebody come over adversities. So give them something to relate to, and then some real strategic tools and practices that they can use to apply to those situations. So it's definitely that, but it also deals with a lot of professional development. So I like speaking to the youth because of what we already discussed, but I also like speaking to first generation professionals, which is what I was or am. First generation professionals, because we have sometimes have a different feeling when we walk into rooms that we weren't normally in before and don't feel as comfortable in. So I also like that lane as well.
Perfect. And then, as a prosecutor, you've seen several cases and people that come through that you can relate. You know maybe what they're really going through, and a lot of times you've seen it all. So you know this isn't my first rodeo, and you're trying to sell me something that's not true, or you have to dig into the truth. What excites you about that on a daily basis, that when you're in there searching for the truth or making sure that you're giving them their justice, at the same time you're doing the justice of the people? What is the driving force for you when you're doing that job?
It is the pursuit of justice in those instances, because it can be so different case by case. Justice isn't necessarily a conviction in a case, so it depends on the case. You have the input of the victim. You have, as prosecutors, we worry about the victim who was affected in the crime, but then we also worry about potential victims, like the public, and what happens if this person is not held accountable. But we also have to consider the history of the assailant, or if it's an assault, we often have to consider that. So when you really try to come up with something that is just, you can sometimes get creative, but it's really fulfilling when you come up with something that really makes a victim who has already been through a lot feel that you have heard them and have done the best you can to make remedy a bad situation. Unfortunately, the criminal justice system doesn't provide a full remedy, so I'm not under that mistaken belief that that's what it is. But in the small part that we play in justice and overall justice, it's good to be able to contribute.
The comments that I've heard from other people when I brought your name up, it was rock star, that she is on top of it. And what do you think makes you that person? What drives you to be that person?
I think it's tenacity, just because I had so much to overcome early on that I don't really get afraid of challenges. I just think it's tenacity, and because I had so little resources, I can get very creative in bringing about justice, and in jury trial, and how I use the evidence code. So I think it's those two things together. So my background really kind of helps with that.
To be an attorney and to chase that career and go into that career, and again, if a young person's watching, what should they be studying? What is important that now maybe you look at in your career today that you say, oh, I wish I would have paid more attention to that when I was in school? What would that be?
Well, for me, I know it was like the basic practical stuff, like typing and being able to be competent in the core things that you need to be an attorney. So reading, writing, comprehension, analysis, those kind of things. And then also being able to relate to other people who are not like you. That is incredibly important, because everybody has their own unique story of how they got to be where they are. And so being able to step out of your own perspective and try to understand it from someone else's is huge.
A lot of listening.
Yes.
Probably a lot of listening and processing and being able to get through the minutia, if you will, and get to the core of the issue. And so daily, so then as a prosecuting attorney, you talked about being a specialist and going out and speaking. What do you see into the future that you'll be doing with that career?
Hopefully, my hope is that I do it more. I really like it, so that's kind of where my recreation is, and it's kind of sad to say that is my recreation, but it's kind of
outside of work. You're doing that,
right, outside of work. Yeah, that's kind of where my recreation is. So hopefully, to be able just to speak more and larger audiences.
Absolutely. And so with that, do you have a place where someone can find your information and find out how they can have you come speak to their organization?
I do. I have my website, so it's Miiko Anderson, just my name.com. And it lists the keynotes, speeches, and topics that I cover, as well as a contact page on how to reach me if you had any questions.
Absolutely, and they can go there and they can get all the information about you speaking. And also, too, I think you seem to be that type of person. If they're interested in being an attorney or they have questions, feel free to reach out
Absolutely,
to you.
absolutely.
Reach out to you and do that. We got one more segment to go, and when we come back, I want to talk about your grandmother.
Oh, okay.
Took care of you, and she raised you.
She
And I
did.
think she had some impact on you. And we'll talk a little bit about that and more when we come back with Miiko Anderson. But before that, it's time for the 40 Under 40. We got to get our nominations in. If you go to 40, the letter U, 40.com, 250-word description gets your nomination in. And the past alumni members of the 40 Under 40 will select the new class of 2022. We'll be right back with more business leaders right here at KMPH Fox 26 with Miiko Anderson.
Thank
We'll be
you.
right back. Welcome back to Business Leaders. My name is Lance Cardoza. Catch our past episodes by going to businessleaders.tv. And now you can catch us on Spotify, iTunes, and you can get your podcast wherever you get your podcast. Look for Business Leaders with Lance Cardoza. Now we're on podcast. You can catch Business Leaders everywhere. In studio with me, I have Miiko Anderson. We've been talking about your career, and young people get in a position sometimes they give up or they chase a dream that is impossible because they're not applying themselves to it. You had some motivation when you were young. Your grandmother took care of you during the time. Talk to me a little about it, if someone didn't join us in the beginning, your situation with your home life and grandma stepped in.
Oh, absolutely. She did. And she was really a guardian angel for me because at that time, and I think it was I was going from second to third grade, so I think that's 8 or 9 years old, is when I went to live with her. And it was just because things at my mother's house were just unsafe. My mother was, like I said, she at that time was addicted to drugs, and it just was an unsafe environment for a child. So I moved in with my grandmother, and she did everything for me. So she gave me a different perspective and removed me from all that and had a very safe home environment for me. And she was really a community leader herself. She worked for the school system, but if anybody had a lawsuit or a complaint or a grievance, she was the person that people would call before they would call their attorney, and she would refer them to their attorney. So she was kind of like a neighborhood lawyer. So she was a very huge impact in my career choice and in my life.
A lot of community people looked up to her, and I could tell when you mentioned your grandmother, I could tell there was something there.
Yeah,
And she had an impact, definitely, and sort of changed your trajectory.
Absolutely.
And gave you that opportunity to do what you're doing today.
Absolutely. I was an only child and an only grandchild, so I had all of her attention all the time. So that part was really good.
You were the joy of her life there, I'm sure.
Yeah, at 8 years old, we'd sit together drinking coffee and watching Match Game and Perry Mason and the news. That was it. That was it. So
Perry Mason was the influence. I wonder how many people became an attorney by watching Perry Mason. There had to be many.
It had to be. It had to be.
It had to be many. Talk about your business that you're offering as a consultant and being an expert in the field of criminology and based on the crimes, the certifications that you have. Can you elaborate a little more on that and how someone could obtain your services and why, as an expert in the field, you can help their organization or open the eyes to somebody as a potential career?
Sure. So for me, part of what I do when I work as a consultant or a speaker, I talk about exploitation prevention. So I have workshops and do talks on how to prevent being exploited in the very beginning. So to help, especially the youth, really recognize what that exploitation, what it looks like, how it appears, because it's very insidious. It's not as straightforward as some would think. So giving some insight on that. And because separately, when it comes to exploitation, I have had some personal experience in that lane as well. I've had a family member who was exploited in a way that was really brutal. So I was able to learn about human trafficking and exploitation from both sides of the coin, from as a prosecutor, but as a family member of a survivor as well. So I give a really in-depth view and tools and tactics on how to avoid exploitation. And that's for youth and for the professionals that work with those really high risk environments. And then my other passion though is for empowerment. And normally it's women empowerment, but it's for empowerment and for those who are struggling to overcome whatever obstacles they face in their life on a day-to-day basis. So whether it's burnout for an employer, an employee burnout, whether it's how to get to the next step, whatever that hurdle is, to have some talks and discussions on how to come up with a plan to overcome that. So that's the other area that I like to work in.
And they can find all that information at your website, which is Miiko Anderson.
Yes, MiikoAnderson.com.
MiikoAnderson.com, and we have that on the lower third here where you can be able to take a look at that and go to our website. And book you as a speaker with youth, and not only subject matter in the industry of what you work in, but with youth too, and empowerment, and be able to give them a little focus in life. And I think I wanted to hit on a little bit with human trafficking. I think people don't realize how vulnerable our youth are in certain situations. You might think they're safe, and you see it.
Absolutely, and there's no population that is immune. So there are some populations that are targeted more frequently, so they're more susceptible because they have different vulnerabilities, but there is no population that is immune. And predators, those type of predators, exploiters and abusers, tend to know how to find whatever those vulnerabilities are and exploit them. So the key in what I speak to the youth is giving them tools to help assess somebody's intent, and I tell them to really assess what is going on, people, places, and things, what is going on, what type of environment it is, and what is being asked of you, and what is being accepted. And then to find a way to intervene, no matter what it is. And if you don't know the solution, especially as a youth, because you can't be expected to know, just have a support system who you know to go to get some answers. So help you to draft that plan in case something comes up. And then finally, to release, because one of the things that predators do in the grooming of victims is they use shame and guilt to keep victims from alerting other authorities and other people, and to release that, because that is a tool of a trafficker or an abuser. It's not something that is new, it's something that they have been doing over and over again, and it's something that a trafficker or abuser will never let go of. So you have to kind of hit it.
So as adults, we have to make sure that we're good sounding boards. We're a trusted source to be able to let them open up and ask the questions, or we ask them questions ourselves.
Absolutely, that, and then also have a backup supporting system, because sometimes no matter how open we as parents are, our children just don't want to talk to us.
Absolutely.
So
you gotta find that trusted source.
Right.
That's
so
all the
finding
time we
somebody
have.
else.
Appreciate you being on my program.
Thank you.
Next Tuesday, right here.